I'm Andy Boyle, an instructional technology specialist for the iTeach Center at Kennesaw State University. But more importantly, I'm a teacher. I spent about 10 years experimenting with various technologies in my classroom, trying to find the best way to use new and emerging ideas to get my students engaged in learning. From my efforts, I learned a lot about what excited and motivated my students so that their learning became more authentic and more memorable. I'd like to share some of the lessons I learned with you while teaching in a blended social studies environment. 1. Kids want to be engaged. It doesn't matter if you're using iPads or paper and pencil. If your students are not engaged in your lesson, they're not learning. I found that by letting my kids use the same technologies that they were using in their home, in my class, that they were more engaged and that their learning increased. My foray into educational technologies began in 2002 when I built my first website for the soccer team I was coaching. I posted stats and comments about our games and tried my best to keep it up to date. It was built using Microsoft's front page, if you can remember that. I noticed that the more up to date I kept my site, the more comments I was getting from students. And not just my students, but students from all over the school and eventually from other schools in the area. So I started doing what any teacher would have done. I added games. So I started posting nightly questions. I made a Dropbox in my classroom. I would post a question online, and kids that submitted the right answers in the Dropbox the next day, they'd receive an award. Most of the time, it was candy. I would tie the questions to what we were learning in geography class. Most of the time, they were questions having to do with social awareness or current events. The lesson here is that my kids were engaged. They were taking it upon themselves to find the question online, search out the answer online, and then actively participate in the discussions that ensued in class. I learned early on that kids were on their computers at home. And if I could get them learning at home, it made my class more engaging, more enriching, and more fun. Today, I spend most of my time convincing teachers to encourage kids to use their own devices in class. Because there are so many different perspectives on any given subject, particularly in a social studies classroom, personal devices allow our students to investigate your lessons from any of those perspectives. As long as they're interested, students will seek out more and more answers without even being told to do so. This wouldn't have been possible 10 years ago. With more and more school districts implementing blended classroom strategies, students will become more and more engaged. 2, kids want resources, so post everything. Post your notes before class, post your study guides, your homework, your worksheets, everything. Upload your digital textbook or post a link to it. The more resources we can give our students, the better prepared they'll be to learn. You want to make sure that you're aware of copyright and post responsibly, but nonetheless, post everything you can. This works great for parents as well. Just as any teacher in the blended and online environment should, I created a very thorough and detailed syllabus when I was teaching. I had a paper copy and a digital copy. The digital copy was full of active links. Every worksheet, every set of notes, every study guide, every reading that was listed in my syllabus was linked to an appropriate file. It also made my life much easier when parents called or wanted to meet about their students. Now, in order for you to post everything, you need a digital hub or home. Many of you already know, or you will come to know, the terms LMS or CMS, for learning or content management systems. I'm a fan of Edmodo. It's platform agnostic, school friendly, and works pretty well with most everything that I've tried to do online. But for you, maybe it's Tumblr, My Big Campus, Blackboard, Blogger, WordPress, Desire to Learn, Moodle, Canvas, Haiku. There are lots of them. Or maybe your system has its own LMS in place. It doesn't matter. Just find a reliable digital home and post as much as you can. 3, kids want to communicate. Establish an open door policy with your students, both in person and online. Create avenues for them to learn how to appropriately communicate with you. They'll have to know how to interact with a boss, a supervisor, or a CEO one day. Use this opportunity to teach them. Whether you're using social media like Google+ or Twitter, texting with Remind 101, or emailing, communicate with your students and their parents regularly. This will encourage students to ask questions and for the parents to stay engaged as well. This open dialogue is key to enable the anytime, anywhere learning model that works so well with our kids in a blended and online environment. 4, failure. The last thing I want to stress is that it's okay to fail. Oh, I messed that up.
That's okay.
I can't tell you how many times I wanted to try something new that I thought was cool or fun with my students, but I didn't because I was afraid to fail. Well, once I learned to put that fear behind me and trust in my students, the doorway to engagement, empowerment, and learning was opened. By seeing me fail and keep trying, my students also learned to start taking the risks that I was asking them to take. We both grew. We both learned when we put the fear of failure behind us. Remember, the blended and online learning environments are new. It's okay to plan activities with new technologies, implement them, and then realize that they don't work well and change course. Always keep in mind that best practices are best practices, no matter what tools we use. Try a million different ones. I hope the lessons that I learned from my time teaching social studies in a blended environment have encouraged you. Good luck, and if you ever need help, please feel free to contact any of us at the iTeach Center at Kennesaw State University.